For thousands of years, masks have been used both in Eastern and Western theatre. The mask is a mysterious symbol which performs many functions. Perhaps the most important, however, is to create a distance or emotional separation between the audience and the actor. Right now, at this very moment as I'm speaking, you're paying close attention to what I say because the mask is a little frightening, a little unfamiliar. It causes distrust. Yet as soon as the mask is taken away, as soon as you can see directly into the eyes of the real human face, you become a little less scared, a little more trusting, and you can start to build something of a more interpersonal relationship. Over the years, as traditional forms of performance art, such as theatre, became less popular, and as television movies became more popular, the mask was slowly forgotten as one of the most important devices within acting. True, we still have some Hollywood movies today, such as Batman and Spider-Man, where the hero wears a mask. Not to mention horror movies, where the killer is usually masked. But generally speaking, contemporary forms of acting do not use masks, but prefer characters which are very realistic, that look like everyday people. Characters which remind us of ourselves. As such, the actor is no longer a person who is mysterious and hidden, but someone whom we feel as if we know personally. This is undoubtedly why famous actors nowadays are so popular, because people confuse the character in the movie with the actor playing the role. Leonardo DiCaprio and The Great Gatsby are not the same person, and Jackie Chan is not really a police detective. But because the mask has been taken away, we fool ourselves into believing that the actor and the character are the same. Let me now ask a very simple question, and the question is this. What is a mask? Well, this is a face mask, but there are also other types of mask. The purpose of a mask is to stop two things coming together. For example, a mask can stop you seeing my face. It stops my face and your eyes from coming together. It creates distance. It's like a wall. In fact, a wall and a mask are very similar, and so a mask is just like a wall. I can hide behind a mask so you cannot see me. I can also hide behind a wall and you cannot see me. A mask therefore does not have to look like a mask often does. Masks can come in different shapes and sizes. Think about other types of masks. A pane of glass can also be a mask, but one which is more difficult to see. When you're driving your car, the glass stops the wind and the rain from hitting your face, but it also allows you to see outside. It is a mask, but one which is almost invisible, and also a mask which you can see through. A mirror can also be a mask, and a mirror is both like a wall and like glass. It is like a wall because we cannot see through it, but it is also like glass because it allows us to see an image. A mirror is a little different from glass, however, because when we look in a mirror, the image that we see is not the outside world, but rather our own image reflected back at us. Mirrors are therefore the trickiest, most deceptive and strangest types of mask, because they mask us from seeing what is behind the mirror and give us a false image in return. They reverse what is real, or show us the opposite of what is real. They make what is in front of the mirror appear behind, and they make what is behind disappear, so masking us from seeing what is real and creating an illusion. Moreover, a camera is a piece of technology which also operates as both a special type of mirror and indeed as a special type of mask. It is perhaps true to say, however, that the camera is less exactly a mirror, but in fact the opposite of a mirror. Specifically, the function of a mirror is to take the image in front and to reflect the light away. On the contrary, the function of a camera is to take the light in front and not to reflect it away, but rather to refract it inward. Yet although a camera takes light in, it does not take in all light, only some light. A photograph, for example, does not show all 360 degrees. It only provides a limited range or camera angle, and so the angle chooses to capture some things, but to mask others. In other words, it operates like half of a mask. The outstanding question, therefore, is not what the camera shows, but what the camera does not show, the angles and range which it hides. Incidentally, every time you watch TV, you're wearing a mask. Every time you go to the movies, you're wearing a mask. Every time you look at photographs, you're wearing a mask. But the mask you wear does not look like this one. The mask you're wearing is invisible. It is hidden and cannot be seen. Now think about filming a movie. When filming a movie, the cameraman chooses the best position to hold the camera in order to capture the activities of the actors in the film. The cameraman may choose to use position A, position B, or position C. Consequently, if the camera adopts position A, it sacrifices or loses positions B and C. B and C become the opportunity cost, if you will. Similarly, if the camera adopts position B, it loses the possibility of showing us positions A and C. Hidden in every camera shot, therefore, is not only a decision about what to show, but equally a decision about what not to show and what to hide. Cinematography and photography alike, therefore, are defined as art forms not just by what they show, but also by what they mask. Consider the picture here. The picture was circulated in various mainstream magazines in 1992, alleging the use of Holocaust-style prison camps in Bosnia. Upon first sight, the photograph looks shocking. When we see this, we feel sick, our sympathies are immediately stirred, and we want to know who did this and how we can help this man. We experience a strong emotional reaction. What seems apparent is that we're looking at a group of men trapped inside a prison, and furthermore that they have no food. At least, this is what the frame of the camera shows us. But what does the camera mask? What else is happening here that we cannot see? Well, since the publication of this photograph, people have raised certain questions. If we look closely at this photograph, it appears we can see the naked bodies of 3 men. Only the man in front is extremely skinny, yet the men behind appear a little fatter and more healthy. Indeed, it has been reported elsewhere that the man in front, whose name is Fikreta Leach, in fact had a medical illness and was not skinny due to malnutrition or lack of eating, but skinny naturally. Furthermore, some have argued that the men were not inside of a prison at all, but were in fact outside the fence looking in. They were on the outside looking inside, not the inside looking out. My concern is not about politics. Indeed, we may never know whether this picture, what it shows, is true or false, since the only way one can ever know is if they were there personally. All we have is the limited perspective of the camera, but this is precisely my point. When you look at this picture, your heart convinces you that it must be true. The camera plays upon your emotions. It may be true, it may not be true, but you believe it first of all without considering all of the evidence. So, the camera masks the truth. Of course, the argument which I'm here making is not my own, but was first put forth over 2,000 years ago by the philosopher Plato. Plato warns us that art is dangerous because it plays upon our emotions. It stops us thinking logically and gets us to trust our heart instead of our head. Accordingly, although the invention of modern photography, television and cinema comes many years after the life of Plato, his argument is still valid today. The idea that we should trust reason, not intuition, that before we consider that an image is true, we should first of all consider the evidence and use our logic to investigate. In support of this idea, Plato argues that life is a little bit like living inside of a cave. Outside of the cave we have the truth, which is like the sun, and the truth shines its light inside the cave. Yet we as human beings face away from the light and into the darkness. We are only able to see shadows and images on the cave wall, created by the light shining onto various objects behind us. In this respect, Plato argues that the purpose of philosophy, the purpose of reason, is to use the evidence which the shadows and images present to us, but never to trust them directly as the absolute truth, since to be a philosopher requires us to realize that the world you think you see is not in fact the same as the way the world really is. Discovering reality in a way is like taking off a mask. If we adopt Plato's point of view, one can see how putting our faith in the camera can be dangerous, since the masking function of the camera only traps us further inside the cave of ignorance. Both the cave and camera alike allow some light to come in, but not all light. The cave and camera both show us a selection of shadows and images, but they stop us from seeing everything. The camera then prevents us from ever truly knowing whether these people are looking out, or whether they are looking in. The camera is a mask, yet unlike this mask, the camera is an invisible mask, one which we cannot see. Moreover, Plato had a student, and that student's name was Aristotle. In common with Plato, Aristotle agreed that under certain circumstances, art could be deceptive, that it might sometimes operate as a sort of mask. Yet unlike Plato, Aristotle was not suspicious of all art, but drew a distinction between good art on the one hand, and bad art on the other. For Aristotle, good art does not mask us from the truth, but rather it gives us the truth. Good art is thus in some ways more useful than science or history, because science and history only tell us about the way the world is right now. Art, on the other hand, allows us to imagine the way things could be in the future. It performs a useful imaginary or creative function, and lets us think about new and interesting ways to improve society and improve ourselves. It does this, Aristotle argues, through the use of imitation. As human beings, it is in our blood, in our very nature, to try and imitate, to copy what we see. In this respect, good art manages to successfully imitate something interesting about our everyday lives. It freezes a moment in time, grabs it, and puts a frame around it for us to look at and study. This technique we might call framing, taking something interesting or beautiful about the world and calling our attention to it by putting it inside of a frame. Nevertheless, art today is not the same as it was back in the time of Aristotle, and in particular, the style in which today's artists apply framing is very different from the style which classical art forms used. Consider the differences between theatre and cinema, for example. When you go to the theatre and take a seat, just like how you're sitting now, all of the story and everything you see all takes place inside of one master frame, the frame created by your own eyes. Right now, you are watching a person on the stage, and so in this way, your eyes are creating a frame around the stage and around my body. Without even thinking about it, you have put me inside of a frame. Yet furthermore, inside of this frame, I know that you are watching me, and you know that I know I'm being watched. On the other hand, going to the cinema is a lot different from going to the theatre. When you go to the cinema, you buy a ticket, you take your seat, and you watch the big screen. The big screen as such creates a large frame around what you can see. But inside the movie itself, there's a frame which we often forget. That is the frame of the camera. When the movie actor is being filmed, the actor knows that he's being watched, and so he changes his behaviour. He gives a performance in order to please the camera. When we watch movies, however, we cannot see the camera, and so we believe that the actor is behaving naturally. Unlike theatre actors, therefore, movie actors know they are being watched, but we forget that they know. The hidden frame of the camera makes us believe that movies are just like real life. We are masked from seeing what's happening behind the camera. If the 20th century was defined by the use of camera through mediums such as photography, cinema and television as a method to frame reality, then surely we must say that the 21st century is defined by the use of computer and of the internet. In regard to computers, they too use a process of framing. Think about Microsoft Windows, for example. Every window is in a sense a frame. When we maximize one window, we make that frame more important and call attention to it. Or when we minimize or close a window, this can be understood as a process of masking. Crucially, the key difference between the application of framing in cinema and television versus the application of framing methods on computer is that unlike the TV, the computer is interactive. Whereas before we sat as spectators and watched passively as the director decided which camera angles to use and which frames to offer, now we in a sense have become the director. We control which frames to open and which frames to close, which aspects of electronic life to mirror and which aspects to mask. Social media, such as Facebook and Twitter, use photographs and videos in order to frame and capture aspects of our everyday lives, but they also perform one other revolutionary function. Social media has taken the passive process of photography and combined it with the interactive process of electronic communication. Not only do the images that we see on social media frame life, in effect they change life, in effect they are life. Moments or frames that we post on Facebook, in fact, not only show the real, they define what is real and cause changes in decisions taken by people in the real world. Whereas previously, art and life were kept separate, now social media has made life become a form of art. The world itself has become enframed. In more traditional forms of art, such as painting, the artist offered a vision of the world which was unique, original and independent. The image which the artist gives us stands on its own and expresses genuine creativity. It holds a sense of mystery and an aura which cannot be copied. Nowadays, however, every frame is linked to other frames, and so the frames or images that we ourselves post become not original actions, but reactions to other people's frames. Social media in this way takes the mystique and uniqueness away from the image, and transforms framing into a process of copying and reframing other people's frames, but without creating anything original for oneself. Social media thus both mirrors and masks. It is like a mirror, because whenever something is posted online, its image is mirrored and copied again and again for many people to see. Whereas traditionally, a singular image or artwork may be kept in a particular gallery or museum. Now, the same image can be mirrored and copied to many different locations all at once. Moreover, it also works as a mask, since you do not know when other people are looking at the images you have posted, and likewise, other people who have posted their own images do not know when these images are being looked at by you. This not only changes the spread of images and how they appear after they are posted, but crucially it changes the way we think and behave before the image itself has been created. Perhaps the best way to explain this phenomenon is by reference to the idea of a prison. This prison, known as the Panopticon, was designed by the 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham. The concept of the Panopticon is to create a jail in which the prisoners are all housed in a circle, with a guard tower in the middle. Crucially, the tower is designed so that the guards can look out of the tower, but the prisoners cannot look into the tower. The reason for this, it was argued, is that since the prisoners do not know exactly when they are being watched, they will improve their behaviour at all times in case they are being watched. Or in other words, by creating an environment in which people do not know when they are being seen, people living in this environment will change their behaviour because they live in a condition of fear, the uncertainty of being seen. The tower as such operates as a mask, and that mask forces people to change their behaviour because they are unsure what is behind the mask. The internet and social media, then, perform a similar function to the Panopticon, since whilst using social media, we are unsure of who is watching, and so we adjust the content of what we say in fear of offending anyone. Yes, social media does provide the potential for free speech, but in reality, this is just an illusion, since nobody in fact does or will speak freely for fear of being watched. But more than that, we find that this actual habit of changing what we say, of self-censorship, with time, begins to change how we think privately. Not only do we adjust what we say online, but the habit of making this adjustment, the fear of being watched, spreads like a virus into the way we think more generally. Accordingly, even in our own personal time, when we are not using technology, the habits of self-censorship created by social media begin to make us more fearful, conservative, and less independently minded people. The masking effect of social media, therefore, not only changes our social lives, but it begins to mask us from the freedom to think for ourselves. Fear of the mask becomes a way of life both online and off. In other words, there is no offline. Our consciousness remains online 24 hours a day. Social media thus not only works as a mirror by copying and recopying various frames and images, but it encourages us psychologically through fear to produce images and forms of artistic expression which are copies to begin with. The mask it creates makes us afraid to be creative or original because we fear that we're being watched and judged by other people. We feel as though we must conform to their frame and not our own. My final point, therefore, is if you want to help society in the future and help yourself, you should watch less TV, less movies, and apply more discipline when using social media. Instead, exercise your imagination by reading books, speaking to different people, and implementing your critical abilities rather than your copying abilities. It's time to take off the mask.